I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov, the defender of the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Ryabkov, pit chairs for a day. With the received states of cabin Tomahawk missiles of Ukraine can lead to grave consequences. The intercessor of the Minister of the Zakordnik Right of the Russian Federation, speaking out of such a statement of the coming day after the President of the United States, Donald Trump, may he still come to reason. Before a positive exhibition, even before the day of Tomahawk missiles in Ukraine, and Tilka, I would have missiles. So the rank of Ryabkov's claim was overgrown by the Americans. And the intercession of the Minister of the Russian Federation's over-the-top certificates are being given before the propaganda reception. Allegedly, the press secretary of the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov, has already reached him. Both Ryabkov and Peskov say that the Tomahawk missiles are not without the training of American personnel. With such a rank, the Kremlin and the infection in the White House. Another time for the day of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, and the launch of a missile workshop on the territory of the Russian Federation. In Moscow, there will be counselors for the participants, and the launch of the rocket workshop were American Viskov. And Tilly did not help the American intelligence information. This means that Russia will be qualified to launch Tomahawk missiles on the territory of the Russian Federation. Yak direct conflict mish with the received states and Russia. And on the thought of the Russian roots of Maya, but with the head argument, I am the primus of the president from the received states of Navka. We are perfectly well, of course, there is still a move here, and behind everything, there is no direct fate of the American launch temples, whose maintenance shop is Dolabin rockets. And about the fact that American Visco participants and the process will also be counselors in Moscow. And such a rank can strike here, not on the territory of Ukraine, but let's say on American Visco objects on the territory of Europe, but on the territory of the most recently received states. The cost of such a blow to date is overestimating the theoretical one. Russia has saved that President Trump's prefixes of his administration are involved in the reconnaissance of Poti, and the type of packed missiles to the dropped forces of Ukraine. However, the propaganda hype. I am a power in Moscow, on the injection of a Tomahawk, the demonstrable president of Russia Putin will really beat up. On the Donya workshop of missiles of Ukraine. And on the right behind everything on the Tilka, at the very rockets. The intercessor is the Minister of the Transcordial Affairs of Russia Sergei Ryabkov, so saying that from the point of view in Moscow. The so-called positive potential of Zustrichi in Alaska has already been scooped out. I am so positive potential. And the oyster in Alaska ended in an obvious fiasco. The president with the received states and the Russian Federation failed to make it practical no easier. And not about the explosions in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front, and not about the continuation even before the completion of the Russian-Ukrainian guilt, and not about holding a trilateral oyster of Presidents Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Zelensky. And not about holding bilateral oysters of the presidents of Russia and Ukraine, and not about the accelerated nuclear discharges. And not about one can see the normal operation of embassies from the United States and the Russian Federation. The view is visible in Moscow and in Washington. And for Putin, a positive result is Zustrichi and with Trump, contrary to the fact that the status quo was saved. The headraps of the President of the Russian Federation for an hour of Donald Trump's stay in the Oval Office. There were no new sanctions against the Russian Federation, still allowing Moscow to blame Ukraine for Chinese, for Indian energy sponsorship. There was no greedy decision about the new serious whiskey of Ukraine. He also has his own chaga, allowing the president of Russia to plan, but massively, not air strikes on the territory of arming Ukraine, but the fact that his army is slamming, but Ukrainian territories. But the PPR of Kola at the White House is about the arrival of new Dalekoby missiles in Ukraine, Yakiken and strategic objects, also on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. The status quo can be destroyed. Tomahawk today, tomorrow, but in the packages of the Temple Domo, for the dropped forces of Ukraine. Tomorrow, but serious sanctions are not against the Tilka of the Russian Federation, but about energy sponsors. And the active position of the entry even before Ukraine at the Russian-Ukrainian v. And we mean the Kremlin bureaucracy still has the positive potential of the Zustrichi of the American and Russian president at Anchorage. Scooped out. Here is a positive potential for Putin. Hundreds of envious reactions to his aggressive intentions of war and arrogance. And I also, that is, starting with Nadia and Putin's cotton wool. This means that there is still a positive potential starting to be scooped out. And it is also needed here, but the visits are still visible status quo. Well, and this means that we are still overgrown. Moscow will go into pogroms at the address of Donald Trump and his administration. Namagayashi to explain that it is ready to be broad. Bilsh of a serious conflict, and with the received states right up to a direct one, and a direct one between two nuclear and over attempts. And with a partisan retinue you apply from a bureaucratic move to a realistic one, like the third holy wine. And Putin is still being bullied by Vin, who will be able to trade this fear, and Donald Trump with the status quo brigade, and push the American president not to bring the situation to such a fault. And no one has said that those with Putin's sample, Trump's roles, will be productive for the Russian president, because at once they will belittle the Americans. Dyakuyu. Agree on the channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to my social channels in Patreon, Coffee, and Donatello. And it helps to develop these resources, the sponsorship function itself, and we are ashamed of you.